Hello and welcome. I'm Barkha Dutt and you're watching The Mojo Story, our independent digital platform that takes an in-depth look at the big stories of the day. On the program today, what could be more important than the second phase of India's vaccination push? And it has been led by none other than the Prime Minister himself. The day started with the Prime Minister arriving at the All India Medical Institute, where the Prime Minister led by example, tweeting out and releasing these photographs of him taking the COVID jab. Now, ANI reports that the vaccine that the Prime Minister was administered is the one manufactured by Bharat Biotech, the COVAXIn injection. And remember that in a country which is still facing vaccine hesitancy, which translated simply means that many people, including health workers, are simply not showing up for their jab, the Prime Minister there, being administered the vaccine by a nurse from Kerala, is hoping that this should put at rest all fear-mongering and rumor-mongering. But big questions still remain, and one of them is not just around vaccine hesitancy, but also the pricing of vaccines in India. Many people in the private sector are suggesting that the cap that has been set by the government, which is at 150 rupees for the vaccine manufacturers, the 250 rupees, by the way, includes 100 rupees of hospital fees. So the vaccine manufacturer is just getting 150 rupees, making it probably the cheapest vaccine in the world. But vaccine manufacturers are, at least unofficially, upset about this. Pharma leaders like Kiran Shaw have gone on record to say that vaccine manufacturers are feeling betrayed by what is an unsustainable cost. This is what her tweet said, that this capping is simply too low to sustain. On the special broadcast today, we'll be calling the experts to talk about two big questions. Does the Prime Minister and those pictures at least mark the beginning of the end of vaccine hesitancy? This on a day when anyone who is a senior citizen should theoretically be able to go and get his or her jab. And two, is the costing in fact sustainable? Let me introduce on the program today our panel of experts. We're joined on the program by N.K. Ganguly, who's of course led the Indian Council for Medical Research. Welcome to the program, sir. We're joined by Dr.Harsh Mahajan of Mahajan Labs, did a lot of work in the testing space. I'm curious to see if you'll be also getting into the vaccine administering space. We're joined by Vikas Dandekar, well-known journalist with the Economic Times. Welcome to the program, Vikas. Professor Virander Chauhan, scientist, has devoted his life to the vaccine space. With us as well, Dr. Navin Dang of Dang Laboratories, again, was leading by example in the private sector space when it came to RT-PCR tests. Welcome to the program, sir. And well-known public health and bioethics expert Anant Bhan is also with us. So welcome everybody to the program. And I just want to start with you, if I may, N.K. Ganguly. Two things have happened. The Prime Minister leading by example, taking that shot, ANI reporting that it's actually the Bharat Biotech jab because that's the vaccine over which there has been some amount of controversy. I'll come to the costs in a moment. Do you think the Prime Minister leading by example is going to mark the end of vaccine hesitancy in a country where in 8 states, less than 50% of health workers turned up to take the jab, according to India Spend, at least a couple of weeks ago? That's the data we last had.
Actually, this will go a long way in putting confidence in this vaccine, and he chose the vaccine which has the most controversy. So that will put up a lot of faith by people that if Prime Minister has taken, then it must be safe and efficacious. The second thing that he waited for his turn. So when it came for 60 and above, only then he took it. This also gives a message. So this will go a long way. But vaccine hesitancy in every population remains very difficult to overcome it. And particularly the first part was in the health workers and who were very knowledgeable and who were tracking everything. So the vaccine hesitancy was much more there. I am in an organization where influenza vaccine was provided by the organization to everyone, and everyone took it. Not even a single person refused. So this particular mode in general population will go much more in boosting confidence. But health workers are a different breed and scientists are different breed. They how they gather knowledge, they make their own opinion, and sometimes hesitancy, which we saw was much more in this particular group. But I hope that this suggestion, this gesture by Prime Minister will invoke a lot of confidence in the general population. It's not a joke to give a vaccine to Prime Minister. You have to be very sure about the safety part as well as some other things. These data were not in public domain. Much of it was not in public domain, but I hope this is put in public domain also in a very transparent way,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that people become more confident.
Okay, I think on the Prime Minister leading by example, there are no two opinions. We don't really have to spend a lot of time talking about it in terms of the signaling that the Prime Minister is trying to send in terms of vaccine hesitancy. Professor Ganguly, I'll open up straight, therefore, on the caps and the rolling of the role of the private sector. Now, we have Kiran Shaw, a major industry leader, going on record to talk about the pricing and saying that the vaccine leaders are actually feeling betrayed and that this cost is simply unsustainable. It was meant to be $3 per jab. It's now down to $2 because the 250 rupees includes 100 rupees that is going to the private clinic or hospital, and 150 rupees is going to the vaccine maker. How do you see, Professor Ganguly, this cost?
Actually, this cost is unsustainable. I agree with that, because when a vaccine which is discovered, there are discovery costs, there are preclinical toxicology costs, there's a clinical trial cost, there's a facility cost, and then there is a distribution cost, as well as creating special storages for that. So and the vials for these are very, very special. It is a multi-vial distribution. So the vial cannot get moisture, they cannot get infected. They have to count the number of jabs which have been taken out, and vaccine wasting has to be minimum. The level even costs more. So this cost is very, very low. But Pune company got everything ready-made from the main discoverers. Even the trial was done in multi-country. The cost was borne by someone else. So only thing they did was 1,600 and facility costing. But even then the price is unsustainable. So what happens that in India, when the vaccine manufacturers sell it in program, they hardly make any money. They get, but if they get it WHO pre-qualified, they send it to, they will sell it to COVAX, they will sell it to other international agencies and other countries, and from there they will make money. This was a model for a very, very
No, so are
long
you
time
okay?
in
Are you
India.
okay with this price? Do you think for our
Now,
country, I need to
I'm
open
not,
this up. Are you okay with this price?
no, I'm not okay with this price, because the vaccine manufacturers also have to sustain and invest in the new discoveries. So
Okay.
they should make reasonable profit, not outstanding profit, reasonable profit, or they need to be subsidized.
All right. So we have the former head of the ICMR saying this is unsustainable costing. Let me take this straight to Navin Dang and Harsh Mahajan. Dr. Mahajan, I'll start with you. You were in the testing space, both of you. What do you have to say about the costing? What do you have to say about Kiran using such a strong phrase as saying that the vaccine manufacturers are feeling betrayed? And when we actually look at a cost comparison with, let's say, Pfizer, Moderna, which are, of course, very expensive because, they need special storage facilities, but even down the chain, Sputnik, Johnson & Johnson, $10. Now, that $10 is not clear to me whether it's the price for the consumer or the vaccine manufacturer. But it still means 150 rupees for the vaccine manufacturer in India, which I guess some people would say is peanuts.
Well, Barkha, there are two aspects to the whole vaccination drive. One is the vaccine itself, and the other is the delivery. As far as the delivery goes, the private sector was very, very clear that it wasn't in the thing to make any money out of it. They were willing to join hands with the government to deliver the vaccination as quickly as was possible. And that's where the government now has decided 100 rupees per jab as the maximum. And I haven't heard any protests from the private sector hospitals. Even if they end up spending more, they are willing to absorb it. So this is what I know from the private sector hospitals.
But when Professor Ganguly says it's unsustainable, you don't agree with that? You think there's enough profit in that space to subsidize this?
I'm coming to that second part, which is the cost of the vaccine itself. It appears that the vaccine is going to be picked up from the manufacturer by the government. It'll be transported by the government, and then it'll be sent to the government as well as private hospital sites by the government. So that cost is not going to be now, whether 150, which is just $2,
Yeah.
is actually sustainable or not, I think that's for these two manufacturers to say. And I'm sure if it is not sustainable, they would already be in talks with the government, and the government should subsidize it. But
Yeah.
that has to come from the manufacturers, because we have no way of knowing how much is the cost that they've incurred in actually
In
doing the
actually
research as
creating the
well as the
vaccine.
manufacturing. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Dang, do you want to add to that? Do you want to add to that? Do you think
Yes,
that if the vaccine, yeah, go ahead.
I want to add quite a bit to that.
Yeah.
I fully agree with what Kiran said. I fully agree with what Dr. Ganguly has said, and only partly with what Dr. Mahajan has said.
Okay.
Here we have got two segments where the vaccination is being delivered. One in the government hospitals, one in the private hospitals. People who cannot afford can very well avail the services in the government hospitals. I myself had the privilege of being vaccinated in a government hospital. The
Okay.
system was absolutely in place. Everything was absolutely flawless. I went to a government hospital in Malviya Nagar. From entering till exit, from vaccination, from being explained everything, from being made to sit after the vaccine was given, etc., etc. The process was absolutely smooth. I'm quite sure people who cannot afford 250 rupees can go to those hospitals. But why not the people who can afford go to private hospitals and pay more? Because ultimately it is the taxpayers' money which is at stake. It is ultimately taxpayers' money which is being spent from producing the vaccine to delivery to everything, etc., etc. So I would feel that 250 rupees totally an unreasonable cap. I see no reason why the private hospitals or private institutions should be going in a loss. And not to say that they should make a profit out of it, but whenever anything goes in a loss, it does not last for long. All of us are aware of this fact that it will not be sustainable for a long time. So I would say that the price should be increased for the private sector, and people who cannot afford it can very well be allowed or will be more than happy to go to very well functioning, very smoothly running hospitals.
And what is the downside? What disturbs you when you say you agree with Kiran Shaw saying that the vaccine manufacturers feel betrayed? These are not sustainable costs. What is the definition, Dr. Dang, of not sustainable? What do you actually mean by it?
See, from the time the vaccine reaches the hospital, I do not know, but Dr. Mahajan must be absolutely right. The vaccine being picked up by the hospitals and being delivered out there. But in this picture also what you're showing, there's manpower cost, there's delivery cost. There's so many hidden costs which when we're sitting at the other side of the fence may not be able to realize or see. So even people who stand in a queue, there has to be somebody to make them stand in a queue. Look at all the barriers which have to be put up. Look at all the discipline that has to be maintained. Look at the place which has to be created for these people to sit down. Everything costs money. And when we want the best, when we expect the best, and when we are capable of giving the best, I think in this era, where 250 rupees, I think is kind of meaningless, where not even a pizza costs that much. I think uh, I think 250 is absolutely, if you pardon me for saying so, atrocious surprise. It should be much more than that, and can easily be given by people who can afford it, and those are the people who are going to the bigger hospitals also.
Okay, strong words there and blunt words, and not too many people are willing to come out and say what they're saying privately. Vikas, you've spent a lifetime reporting this space. What are you actually picking up about the mood among vaccine manufacturers and in the private sector that made such a big push to be involved? And now that it is involved, the pricing has become a contentious issue. Vikas.
Right. Yeah. So basically, I agree with all the speakers who spoke about the unsustainability of vaccines. But in a situation like a pandemic, I think the biggest thing that we have seen from the Indian players is about the volumes. and the commitment that they have actually given to COVAX, the alliance between Gavi, CEPI, and WHO, runs into millions and millions, almost a billion doses alone from Serum Institute. Also, the India demand itself is going to be humongous, and typically, vaccines is a volumes business, and when you actually talk about mass immunization, the role of private sector, the very reason for the government to have involved the private sector is that it should be done in a fast manner, not just about the government facilities being used, but as much as power can be actually given to these vaccine centers so that most people can actually get vaccinated before we see the pandemic again making a comeback. So, in my view, I think the world depends on Indian vaccines. Almost 60% of world immunization actually comes from Indian companies. Serum Institute is one of the big ones. Agreed on the risks that people have research has taken. I mean, new platform technologies have come, but at the extreme end, if you see Pfizer and Moderna, they have been talking about alone in 2021. They are talking about $15 billion alone from COVID vaccine. Same, not in the same nature, but about 10,000, 15,000 crore is what we are actually going to be seeing Serum Institute or even Bharat Biotech make from their just one COVID vaccine. So I think there is somewhere in the middle. The solution is whether 150 or 250 is sustainable. We don't know about the dynamics of the cost of manufacturing, the distribution. Of course, these must be really very challenging situations. But I feel when this kind of a formula has been worked out, the volumes will play a very big role.
Okay, I'll get Dr. Dang to and Professor Ganguly to respond, but Professor Chauhan and Anant Bhan, Professor Chauhan, to you first. The fact is that if we do a comparison, Pfizer, Moderna are obviously in a different space. They are, they're made differently, they're stored differently, and anyway, they're not coming to India. Somebody I was speaking to this morning, an industry leader who didn't want to be named, actually said that at this rate, you won't even get Sputnik and Johnson because nobody's actually going to be willing to operate at these completely truncated prices. Is that something that concerns you, Professor Veer Chauhan?
So Johnson and Johnson got approved by FDA yesterday, and their production line is still very thin. They are just giving 2 million shots as you and I speak. They'll be transferring. So Johnson and Johnson A is not being produced here. B, it will have to go through some testing. So Johnson and Johnson would be, although highly desirable vis-a-vis competition, will be a few months before it gets rolled out. Novavax is waiting in the wings. FDA has all the data. Novavax would be produced by Serum Institute, but still these will be 3-4 months later. I don't want to repeat what others have said, except for that these are volume business. When you are advocating vaccine for huge population, 3-4 things become very important. One is safety, efficacy, and therefore prime ministers and Queen Elizabeth and Boris Johnson, Joe Biden, everybody got vaccinated. So that's the message.
Yeah.
The other is cost itself becomes very important when you're going to go to a street vendor and everyone. So cost becomes very important. I think Krishna Ella will be the right person to say whether it is sustainable or not sustainable. But let me just add this to you. When Oxford University signed a contract with AstraZeneca, they worked out the cost. AstraZeneca are not foolish to sign a contract for $3 a shot. So $3 a shot covers AstraZeneca to produce the vaccine and also cover a little bit of profit, not huge profit. So,
but we have gone below $3. From the vaccine manufacturer's point of view, Veer Chauhan, we've gone below $3.
Absolutely. If vaccine manufacturers are saying, not others, not Professor Ganguly, not me, not Dang, not others, if two vaccine manufacturers say, looks 150 is unsustainable, I'm sure they are talking at the back. Just wait for a week. Let us see whether this is, there's a hue and cry from those who are actually doing. What we are doing, we are watching the press and the newspaper and passing judgment that this is sustainable, this is not sustainable. Let Mr. Ella and Punewala say this is not sustainable. I'm sure government will deal with it. Remember, very large number of can get this vaccine for free. So there's no issue. Now, lastly, should I or Dang or Ganguly pay more for for this vaccine, surely we can afford to pay more.
That's the
Should we-
point. Anyone going to private sector presumably can afford this. Can afford to pay more than 250 rupees.
Pay 800 for my flu shot. But people like you, me, and Professor Ganguly and Dang would be, skim them off at 1%. After that, the cost becomes important. So word is not made up by few of us. Word is made up just below us, a very large number of people, and cost does become important. I would not like to make a comment whether this is sustainable or not. Let the vaccine producer make a call on this.
Okay, let me just bring Anant Bhan into this conversation now. Anant Bhan, vaccine equity was one of the things that was greatly stressed on. But the fact is that why should vaccine equity extend to those who can afford to pay more? And in fact, I believe that those who can afford to pay more should at this point be subsidizing those who cannot afford to pay more. And why do we have this kind of flattened out rate for those who have much more money compared to those who don't? As an ethicist, what do you think?
Sure. Thanks, Barkha, for having me. So a couple of things I think which are relevant here. One, the two vaccines we are dealing with in India specifically, were co-sponsored by the government. The ICMR is a co-sponsor on both of these clinical trials through which the vaccines have been allowed to be used in India, which also means that as a co-sponsor, you have a certain negotiation right. If I am a co-sponsor, I could negotiate a much better bargain than anyone else because of the nature of that relationship. And that is perhaps something which the government has leveraged.
What do you mean by co-sponsor? The government is not sharing the costs that other Poonawala spent. So how is it a co-sponsor?
Okay, so I said the vaccine trial. So the only way they were able to market the vaccine through the emergency use authorization mechanism is because ICMR was a co-sponsor on the clinical trial for both COVAXIN and Covishield in India, which means that if you did not have that co-sponsor tag, it might have been difficult to go through the regulatory pathway. In fact, the companies proactively partnered with the government through ICMR to get their clinical trials through. The second thing is specifically for COVAXIN, ICMR through the National Institute of Virology actually was the party which provided the strain which is being used for the development of the vaccine. So there it is also in many ways involved much more intricately in the development of the vaccine as compared to maybe Covishield, where the strain comes from AstraZeneca. The third element here is we are dealing with a pandemic. It's a public health response. It is not really any other routine health supply of a device or a service. We're dealing with a pandemic where the more you are able to cover in terms of the population and the earlier you're able to do it, I think the greater benefit there will be.
So do you agree? Do you agree with this costing? When you say that they were co-sponsors in the trials, do you agree with this costing?
Well, I presume they've driven a hard bargain. I'm sure the companies have agreed to it because that is the only way there is supply for the government. But at the end of the day, the private hospitals here are basically just providing a service. It's like booking a Indian Railways ka ticket on Go Ibibo or Make My Trip. You pay a service charge for that, but essentially the ticket of price doesn't change, and that price ticket has been fixed by the government, right? And that is what is happening right now. So you have a service charge which is being allowed, but the government has already pre-decided a cost, and presumably that's been in negotiation with the manufacturer, because otherwise the manufacturer will never give you enough volumes. So presumably it's a volume game as well here. We should wait to hear from the manufacturer. But I think it's important to recognize that they have an important social role to play. They should obviously not be skimmed. No one should be going into loss. But how much of a profit should be acceptable, especially from an equity perspective, is something we should all worry about.
Okay, before I take it back to the actual players in the game, Vikas, let me take that to you. You have been talking to all of these people. What's the mood in the private sector right now? If you had to describe it, they may not come on record, but how would you describe the mood? Is it one of feeling betrayed, as Kiran Shaw argues it is?
So, yeah, you're right. Actually, I spoke to someone who I know has been in this economics of vaccines from an MNC. And in his view, this works well. He was also of the view that as more and more private companies come in, this rigid pricing system may get relaxed.
Okay.
But yeah, in terms of pricing of the vaccine is concerned, he said, as Dr. Chauhan also mentioned about the $3 bargain that AstraZeneca had. he was of the view that this is a mass immunization. And this is going to be a endemic. I mean, it will not end up in 1 or 2 years. So in the calculations that they are doing, it seems that it works for them.
Let me take this back to Dr. Dang and to Professor Ganguly, who have been, I think, in a sense, the most vociferous on this pricing not being sustainable. Dr. Dang, go ahead. You've heard the counter arguments. This is a volume game. This is not the time to make profit. And Anant Bhan even saying that the government was a co-sponsor on the trials, at least.
Barkha, all points are very well taken. We have got a very well-informed set of panelists out here, and you have put forth the points very nicely. But I'll still say that, okay, whatever was the costing given by the manufacturers, they must have been very comfortable with it or would have agreed to it. But then after that, the delivery from the hospitals and then ultimately reaching the patients, I feel 250 rupees is a bit too low for a simple reason that people flocking to the private hospitals mostly are people who can afford to pay for it. Even the government hospitals, when we are having, we are giving the vaccine free of cost, that is again coming from the taxpayers' money. People who are going to the private hospitals, if they can afford to pay more, which I'm quite sure they can subsidize it. Again, it will be going back to the manufacturers only, and ultimately that is going to be used for creating more volumes and more vaccines for us all. So I simply feel that it is necessary that we all sitting out here can afford to pay 100 rupees more than what is being paid right now.
Yeah. But again, the question would be that if this doesn't change, what is the downside? Is there a fear that the options available to the Indian public in terms of the variety of vaccines, and I want to talk specifically about Johnson & Johnson, because Pfizer, as we know, withdrew its application because the local trials were asked for, and in any case, its storage may not be suitable for a country like India. But Johnson & Johnson, single jab, international reports say it can convert COVID into common cold, priced at $10. What happens when it comes up against authorities? I'll start with you, Naveen, and then the same question to Harsh and Veer Chauhan. Are we worried that we may not have as many options as other countries in terms of, let's say, getting a Johnson & Johnson for our country?
More the options, like what I've always said, that why not let the market dynamics decide what the price is going to be? People who want to go in for Johnson & Johnson that is costing an X amount, let people who want to go for that, go for that. People who want to go in for a 250 rupees vaccine or 350 rupees vaccine, let them go for it. I'm quite sure there are going to be more vaccines coming in. We are very well aware that companies like Biocon Ltd, there's one more vaccine coming in from Bharat Biotech. Then there are vaccine coming in from Zydus. There's so many other vaccines which I'm aware of. They'll be priced maybe differently, and let the market choose, let the people choose what they want to. I think putting a cap out there kind of disillusions the manufacturers, and maybe, I do not know, I'm quite sure nobody's ever going to make a compromise in a thing like vaccine. But at the moment, the idea is to motivate more and more private sectors to invest more and more in vaccines, more and more in delivery systems, so that more and more people are benefited from this. So I again will reiterate that fact.
Okay, Harsh.
250 is too low.
Harsh?
What I would say, we are jumping the gun. We are just presuming that Johnson & Johnson is $10 today. It may be $3, 3 months down the line. Let the competition come in. There are so many newer vaccines that are on the anvil, even within our own country. And probably the government has fixed this price, and as everyone has said, it cannot be without discussion with these two manufacturers. And this is just the beginning. You don't want that in a pandemic where you want hordes of people to get vaccinated very quickly. Cost of the vaccine becomes a detrimental factor, and you have people not going because it's more expensive. Of course, there is those who cannot afford anything at all can go to government hospitals and get it for free. And that's 10,000 hospitals which will be giving the jab. But somehow I feel, this discussion, and I have great respect for Mrs. Shaw, and I'm sure she would have also had some reason to speak out as she has. But probably this is probably a evolving system. We will see how it goes. And for all you know, as Dr. Dang has talked about the market forces, maybe this 150 may come down to 125 if there's more competition. It is, after all, a volume game. What I can tell you from the hospital sides who are actually dispensing the jab is that no one is complaining.
Okay, so two very different pictures coming out. Veer Chauhan, just jump in here. Do you agree that with time, so two very different perspectives. Navin Dang believes that you could have private manufacturers getting demoralized, and there's a whole bunch of them still to enter the fray. Harsh Mahajan is arguing the other way, that the more the merrier, and that in itself could change the dynamic, and maybe the government has priced it right now at this. To get more and more people into the centers. But I don't think people care whether it's 250 rupees or 500 rupees, not the ones going to the private centers for sure. And the government ones are getting it free anyway.
So can I just, yeah, fine. So this has been discussed. Let me just say something which must be captured here. A lot of people feel there'll be any more vaccine coming to India very soon because Zydus will come, then Biological Evans, Baylor College of Medicine vaccine will come, or Geneva will come. Let me put this in perspective. Bringing vaccines now, after 8 vaccines have been now approved for emergency, there are 8 vaccines now. Chinese vaccine, China vaccine, Sinopharm is going everywhere, in Dubai or Indonesia, wherever. Now, bringing a new vaccine to India, or for that matter anywhere, is going to be so much more difficult than the first flush, because conducting any kind of phase 3 trial now will not only be very difficult, but almost be unethical. So it's no surprise to me that Imperial College is already talking about having a human challenge model. Because imagine you and I bring a new vaccine from, let's say, X company. Where would you conduct your phase 3 trial with transmission rates being so low?
But why do we need a phase 3 trial? Why do we? This is what we did with Pfizer. I'm sorry, I just want to understand this. Pfizer has tested on more than 1 million people with positive results globally. What is it that we need local trials for? And are you saying tomorrow, if Johnson & Johnson turns out to be the game changer because it's the only vaccine so far that needs a single dose compared to 2 doses, we're going to insist on localized trials? How does that even make sense?
Oh, you're spot on. I'm not saying that. You have to let the regulator of the country has to come out and say, if a vaccine which has not been tested in India, we will do no, that the regulator has to come transparently and state that upfront. But the
regulator isn't taking that approach, right? So my question, sir, is exactly this, that between our insistence on local trials and the costs that we are capping, are we going to be denying large sections of this country the opportunity to choose other vaccines that tomorrow could be better? Now, I ask this as a layperson because there are many people who are saying, look, we'd like to be able to get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine if we can. Now, are there ethical issues there? Are there scientific concerns there, Professor Chauhan?
So very quickly, we may be in this luxurious space of saying that I want Johnson & Johnson. 90% of the world has no vaccine, by the way, 0 vaccine right now. So
90% of the world, 90% of the world has no vaccine.
Hasn't seen the vaccine get delivered. That's absolutely true, because the rich country have behaved exactly as you would expect them to. So they've cornered all the supply to say that tomorrow you can get Johnson & Johnson vaccine here. There are huge gaps of supply in European Union as you and I speak. There are legal wars going on. AstraZeneca has not been able to supply to European Union after having taken payment from them. So let nobody go with this impression that there's a huge amount of vaccines waiting to be bought by people, because that isn't true. The total number of people vaccinated in the whole world till today is roughly about 200 million people. So let's not go ahead of ourselves. We are in very comfortable position that 2 vaccines are being manufactured here. If you don't manufacture A vaccine or B vaccine or C vaccine here, your cost will never be $3 or $4. It will always be more than $10 or $15. And then the sustainability, costing becomes very, very important. So let's not kid ourselves that choices of vaccines are available. If you ask me, whichever vaccine becomes, I hope there'll be enough supply for people who wish to be vaccinated in India from these two manufacturers. Bharat Biotech is not exporting anywhere because, remember, last minute, I shouldn't forget, and FDA has not yet approved AstraZeneca in USA.
But
That
it's
speaks
approved
volumes.
Johnson. But it's approved Johnson and Johnson.
It's approved
It's
Johnson
approved
and Johnson.
Pfizer.
So there must be reason for not approving AstraZeneca.
But sir, those are the vaccines available in India. I mean, are we now? What are we saying?
So therefore, I'm not confusing you. Each regulator in the country would put down conditions for saying yes to the vaccine. So I can explain to you why FDA is saying no to AstraZeneca yet. AstraZeneca might go to FDA, but till today, it's not. There's no politics in it. It's just the regulator has certain conditions to be fulfilled. Johnson & Johnson has just finished that. Novavax has done that. COVAXIN from Bharat may apply and may get it done. But there are rules and regulations for EU. If you say that all rules and regulations, the regulator has to come up. Russians had no regulation. Their phase 3 trial was not started. Sputnik was given to people. Chinese vaccine manufacturers.
So you're saying choice. You're saying choice is an imagined luxury even for Indians. A choice is an imagined luxury.
Absolutely yes.
Okay. Let me get Professor Ganguly and Anant Bhan to join, and then we have to take last comments. Professor Ganguly.
Yeah, actually, I am talking from experience. The job which I held, I have been responsible for introducing large number of vaccine in the country as well as the pricing. The model in India is like this, that before the vaccines are taken up, this was a pandemic situation, so it was different. Before the vaccines are taken up, they go into private market. Private market is 30% of the population, and they make money out of that. And then when government buys it, they normally are able to give it in a much better price. Secondly, the Serum Institute and other get WHO pre-qualification and sell it to other countries, UNICEF and others in a much higher price than they sell it to the government.
So now, are you saying that the private sector space where these companies could have made some profit is what's being denied to them?
Yeah, they are coming to private sector. The Serum Institute is coming in month of June. Johnson & Johnson is being manufactured by BioE. It will come to the private sector. The Novavax, which has now been taken by purchased by the Novavax, the Serum Institute facility in Czechoslovakia. It will come with some kind of licensing in private sector, and Serum Institute was not funded by the government for clinical trial. It was funded hugely by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But you look at one thing, that we have to go to the next generation. Already companies are making, because of mutations and others, next generation vaccine. You have to invest on research. Somebody need to fund the research. In the international sector, all of these research are funded by the funding agencies, whether it is BARDA, whether it is European Union, whether it is Gates Foundation.
What are we doing wrong? What, according to you, are we doing wrong?
We are not doing anything wrong. Majority of vaccines in India are coming through under licensing for already established organizations. They have done huge number of trials in other countries, and India is essentially doing bridging study. But one last thing I want to say, Barkha. Look at that bottle which you are flashing again and again. Look at that self-destruct syringe which has been also flashed again and again.
Yes.
These cost money. This multi-vial costs money because there is not just a vial which you are filling up. This prevents moisture entering. This prevents infection entering. This counts the number. It counts the number of days it will be out. And so ultimately, if we really want to sustain, we should allow to make the private players a little bit of profit, as well as make profit in the private market as well as in the international market.
Okay. I need to go into last comments. Anand Bhan, I'll just let you make your point, and then we'll take a round of last comments. Go ahead.
Okay, quick points. So talking of choice, we don't really have choice even in the private sector right now. You either get COVAXIn or you get Covishield. It doesn't matter if you're paying for it. There is no, I can't go and choose what I want if I go to a particular hospital. The second thing is, while we're talking about profit, we also have to realize that manufacturers have a lot of stock remaining, some of which is expiring, and no one
And
would
some of
want
which could go waste. Some of which could go
waste,
waste if we do
which is
not end vaccine hesitancy, which is why the Prime Minister's vaccine today is so important. But go ahead.
right, sorry. And third point three is that the regulator is not a market enabler. The regulator is a regulator, which is to say that they have a role to play, which is primarily oversight in ensuring that all standard requirements are followed. And hence, in India, the regulator has decided either you need local efficacy data or you need bridging data. Those are the rules. If you change the rules, then the kind of questions that you were asking, why can't we just buy Pfizer data at face value and just let it be introduced? It doesn't exist because those are the rules right now. Final thing I think is there is a silver lining here. There is a silver lining for the manufacturers. The more they are able to actually use the vaccine in India, that data can be used also in their market applications to other regulators. For the hospitals, which are only getting 100 rupees, here they are going to get a whole set of population for which they will have data available. The elderly, those with comorbidities, there is a whole opportunity to cross-sell services.
Okay.
You will have a ready-made database, so no one is losing out totally. There is a silver lining for everyone here, and the most important silver lining is the public health one. The more population coverage, the faster we get it. Hopefully, we'll be able to better deal with the pandemic.
So I just want to, in the end, talk a little bit about that vaccine hesitancy, Vikas. So I'll start by taking last comments here, and I'll start with you, Vikas, if I can. We have the India spend data for about, I think, roughly the middle of February, which suggested, and of course, these numbers could be updated since then, so that's the health warning, but which suggested that 43% of health workers had actually failed to show up for the second dose. That was one. And the second was that in 8 states of India, less than 50% of beneficiaries, it's changing today, but at that time, it was only health workers were not showing up to get their vaccines, right? So I think it's really important that we scale, and that's why the private sector is involved. What are you picking up on the ground in terms of scaling and the numbers and what the push might be to achieve that?
Yeah, so it definitely started with a lot of reluctance, and because the communication was definitely not very clear. I mean, where you see actually the whole vaccine debate being made public, through the vaccine committee in the US FDA. Here, there was hardly any transparency, though we did see some kind of experts, comments coming in from the subject expert committee. So the communication has definitely been not up to the mark, which led to this kind of a hesitation in vaccines. On the part of the viability and the commercial, opportunities, I'd just like to take one example of Novartis, which in 2009 was saddled with a lot of vaccines, and finally the pandemic actually disappeared, and a lot of their stockpile had to be written off, somewhere around $400-500 million, and that's probably the reason why there is so much of risk attached to vaccines. I mean, till the time last year, we were actually not talking so much about vaccines. So vaccines is a risky business, but yes, I mean, there is money to be made. I mean, it's a pandemic of such a huge proportion. And so probably the solution to this whole thing about whether 250 is the right benchmark, works in favor of the vaccine makers.
Okay, so I think this is a very real concern that you've actually flagged, and let me take that to Dr. Harsh Mahajan. There's actually a serious danger that the Serum Institute stocks, for example, could go waste, and one is picking that up if you do not see a mass response to the second phase of India's vaccination drive. Harsh.
I think, that has been already factored in. And you will see, in this coming week, exponential rise in the numbers who get vaccinated as the private sector has come in. You've seen, pictures of halls which are full of people. So even though there was vaccine hesitancy, at the other side, we also see today that there's enthusiasm also for getting the vaccine. And despite the initial glitches in the COVID app, because probably too many people tried, getting on at the same time, later, many people have been able to register. And I think the possibility of vaccines which have been manufactured and which can stay in the fridge for 6 months going waste, I think it's overhyped. It's not going to happen. And let's hope that in case the manufacturers feel that these prices are too low, they can impress upon the government that the price needs to be increased, and only then will they be able to sustain. Or else, if they are fine with this price after negotiation, then so be it. And as has already been said, a lot of these doses in the weeks and months to come will also get exported abroad. These people have already got into transactions with many countries for exporting, and that is where the government should then permit them to export, because that export is controlled by the External Affairs Ministry, and there is this thing going on that friendly nations should get it first, which may be right, but that's where maybe they can make up for any loss that they may have at the 150 rupee price.
Okay, so you're comfortable, Harsh, all in all, with both pace and pricing?
See, the pricing, I'm comfortable with the delivery price, which is 100 rupees. About the 150 rupees, I have no way of knowing whether it's a viable price or an unviable price. Only the two manufacturers know what the truth is.
Okay, and Naveen, to you the same question. Harsh draws a distinction between the 100 and the 150 rupees. Do you have a problem with both of those slabs? 150 rupees, by the way, is what's going to the manufacturer, presumably. 100 to the private
I'll just say one line before
operator.
that.
Yes.
The vaccine hesitancy is going to decline with time. More and more people are getting it. And as we see in India, what we have, what we call a bhedchal, people are seeing one and getting it. Okay, wow, he has got it, nothing has happened, even I'll get it.
Yeah.
So this is going to increase. Rest assured, for any venture to start, initially it takes some time. But a thing like vaccine, within a matter of time, the hesitancy is going to become much less and more people will come forward. Number two, the costing. Yes, I fully agree with all my colleagues who have said that the manufacturers themselves should know better. Dr. Ella himself or Mr. Poonawalla should know what the right price is. But according to me, if we have to have the best of the scientific minds who are going to go in for research, the best and the latest of the equipment, more money has to be pumped in to have tweaking done to the vaccines which we have out there, with a mutant expectedly coming in, with so many variable factors out there, and speed and time itself being a major factor. That means that more manpower, more trained, excellent manpower, more equipment, more research, and more innovations have to be done. And like what Dr. Ganguly rightly said, from bottling to labeling to everything that is out there, the delivery system, extra, everything costs money. I would request that humbly, that if possible, the morale of the vaccine manufacturer should be kept very high, and they should be told that they are doing a good job, which they are doing. Till now in this pandemic, I absolutely say that from the time, exactly 1 year back when COVID came to India, and we first discussed Barkha, both of us, India has done a phenomenal job. From testing to hospitalization, now to vaccination, everything done fantastically. And let's carry it on and not binge upon those, refrain from letting the rich spend 100 rupees extra than what they're doing now.
That's that last point. I'll give Veer Chauhan the last word on this show. Professor Chauhan, I think that point, somehow it seems so intuitive that why can't the rich spend another $100? What is the answer? What is the answer to that? What might the government be thinking?
Let me just quickly say what I want to say about hesitancy and then I'll address your question.
Sure.
You see, with so much push and vaccination having started much earlier and having had more infection rates than India, US hesitancy rates among adults today, as you and I speak, is about 45%. It's much better than what it was before. Same in France, same in Germany. These are highly educated, the machineries are much better, etc. And pandemic was much more serious. I dare say still is. Israel has vaccinated about 70% of its population. Dubai about 50%. We've done about 1.5 to 2%. I don't remember the exact figure. So I would calm down. I'll keep this price, which is very attractive, even if we can pay more, and take a call a week from now. How successful the current drive is. If we can get 5% of Indian population vaccinated, I would celebrate and have a drink with all of you. So 5%, getting to 5% is going to take ages. So I think I would not enter into many more debates, right price, right price. Let us take a call week from now. I just hope many people who had secluded themselves from the rest of the world will just come out and get vaccinated. I think that's the main message we can give all of us, and go and get vaccinated. Encourage everyone to get vaccinated. Let the price be what it is. Let it be. Let's take a call a month from now, and let's see what happens.
Okay. A month from now, I think sounds like a luxury. I think at this point, you're right. We need to be assessing things on a daily basis. But if the vaccine makers are indeed not happy, they need to be speaking up publicly. We also need some sense of what it's costing them, what the sort of scaling costs might be. But we'll have to leave it there. The most important moral of the story at the end is, if you have a chance to be vaccinated, please be vaccinated. Do not succumb to rumors. Do not succumb to fear-mongering. Professor Chauhan just told us 90% of the world does not have access to a vaccine. That to me is a startling figure. So if you have access to a vaccine and you're still not getting it, you're actually being irresponsible, both to yourself and to people around you. I think that's the message to take away as we keep debating all of this. Vikas, Anant, Harsh, Navin, Professor Chauhan, and Professor Ganguly, thank you so much. And to our audience, see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.